Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to talk about a game called The Last Kingdom by Gameland Games, game designed by John D. Clare. I don't declare, you declare, he declare. The Last Kingdom board game is based on the Netflix series. It's also based on a book series involving historical fiction related to England and the Vikings and such. It's a game for 2 to 5 players, area control, but with a twist, an allegiance-like twist. So without further ado, let's get into the game. Okay, let's take a look at what comes in the Last Kingdom board game by John D. Clare. First and foremost, you get the game board. The game board has various areas for different pieces of information and storage. You've got your affinity track, allegiance track. You've got the 5 areas that are going to be contested during the 2 rounds of combat, specific cards for round 1, round 2, and you have your armies for the 4 different factions. The Danes, they're a faction all their own, and then the West Saxons, Mercians, and Northumbrians compose the Saxon faction, or Saxon allegiance. There's a variety of different characters. Lots and lots of different characters are going to show up during the course of the game. Not all of them will show up during the game. Every one of them, just a subset of them. That said, there are, for each players, you can choose a leader. There are one of several leaders to choose from, I believe 8. With custom cards, these are the 2 cards you're going to get to play during both rounds of the game. These are yours. They're specific to your leader, Uhtred of Bebbanburg, King Alfred, Ragnar the Younger, and Aethelflaed are the 2 I've chosen for today. There's also a variety of different tokens. You've got action tokens, which you will use to perform actions in the action market. Money, or victory points. These are victory points in various currencies and values. There's player placards, and these are nice. These are for each player to hide their victory points and certain other pieces of information so that other players can't see them, so that you can't guess or know for a fact how many victory points each different side has. So these are very nice. You'll hide them during play. For our playthrough, we won't have them exposed because that will be silly. Why would I hide information from myself? Sadness. All right. Also, there are a couple other things. There are rings. These are allegiance rings. Your leaders and heroes can either be Danes or Saxons, and based on which allegiance they've chosen, and they can switch sides during the course of play, will determine how they are scored or how many victory points they get when these battlegrounds here in these 5 areas are resolved. You get a bag. This is a one-time use bag. You'll use this once per game. You will put some of these armies together, and then you'll outfit to give kind of a slightly variant starting situation for each character. Again, you'll also notice we've got Aethelwald, we've got Oda, Breda. These are all the leaders you can have. Leaders and heroes overlap, and so if you don't choose, say, Aethelwald as a leader, he can be a hero that comes into the game for some other player during the course of play. So lots of cards, and again, you'll see a variety of tokens and stuff for each player. And we'll take a look at these cards here. You'll see each card has a still from the game, and then it has some sort of special ability. You'll be drafting these over time. Some of these are instants where they take place immediately after the card drafting phase. Others are ones that you can only take one action on a given turn during your round, during the round. And they will do a variety of different things. There's iconography that tells you what to do, and thankfully there's also English text that also goes over exactly what these icons mean right on the card. Very handy. For the 4-player game, which we'll get started on, this is, again, we're going to have Aethelflaed, one of my favorites, Ragnar the Younger, King Alfred, and Uhtred of Bebbanburg. And again, there's also a handy manual. Most of the information is here. It's well presented, well detailed, examples of play, lots of information to give you in its 16 pages. Again, a pretty solid manual, I would say. And that's it. Enough of that. Let's get into an example of play. The aim is to win. You win by accruing more victory points than anybody else who's also playing in the game. Now we're going to start off with laying out the map. So we had this cloth bag. We put 5 Danes and 1 of each other faction in there. We're going to grab 2 of these and we're going to place them. It looks like the Danes are already making their way into Wessex. So you'll see we start with 3 West Saxons here, and that composes that army that currently exists, and now we have 2 Danes there. We're going to go around to each of these areas that have the question marks on their shield. So we've got 2 Danes, 1 Mercian, and then now we're going to add another Dane and another Northumbrian down here. Here we're going to add West Saxon, and we're going to add 2 more in Wales. Okay, so the Danes are looking good to start with. But hey, what does that mean to us? Well, we'll find out. And then we've got Danes there. All right, so we have basically set up the initial state of the map. 3. Oh, what do I have? Oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, yeah, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yeah, we need one more here. There we go. All right, now we go. And this bag tossed. We're done. Okay, we've set up the initial map. Now you notice that our heroes have all started out with on the map in their given location, Northumbria. So you will see Uhtred up here. You will also see Ragnar the Younger. King Alfred, of course, is going to start in Wessex, and Aethelflaed will start in Mercia. Now you're going to give them rings of allegiance, which you will flip over. Right now, obviously, Aethelflaed and King Alfred are Saxons, whereas Uhtred and Ragnar are Danes. This is sensible. It makes sense. It is foreordained. All right, so with that, let's get into another example of how you get victory points. Well, you're going to fight over. We're going to do a drafting phase. And we're going to draft 4 cards to add to our initial stack of 2 cards to have a set of 6 cards. And once that drafting phase is over, we're going to fight over every single region in this realm. All 5, that's right. And that's whoever wins, whatever side wins, either the Danes are going to win or the Saxons are going to win. Based on your affinity, and this is something where everybody starts off with a different affinity. For example, Uhtred has a mix of affinities, so Dane and West Saxons and Mercians, but no real influence in Northumbria. You'll notice, of course, King Alfred, he has no Danish influence. He cannot do Danish influence. He's the king, and so he's got lots of influence in the West Saxon region. These affinities are how you're going to get multipliers when you score victory points. If you win a battle, say in Wales, based on the number of allied units here, up to 5, and the multiplier of those units based on their faction, you're going to get victory points. And that's how it works. That's as simple as it gets, really. That's the essence of the game. Now notice that because I don't have these miniatures painted yet, and you'll see there's a lot of miniatures, like yep. Aethelwold, I'm guessing. And some of these I could guess, some of these I don't. I'm going to go ahead and either paint them and then I'm going to mark them. Come on. Focus. There we go. No, I guess we're never going to focus. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so you can see who that is. Fortunately, on the actual leader cards, they give you the shape of the model, so you'll be able to connect to it. But definitely either paint them or somehow mark them, and you're going to be better off. Because there are because you can control. Yeah, I notice I've got little Sour Patch Kids. That's going to help me remember which of these heroes is which, so I know quickly that Uhtred being blue, that's blue. So just bear with me. That's how I kind of keep them apart when I'm not entirely sure, especially when you start getting more characters down here on the board, how that's going to map out. You can be like, okay, which ones are mine again? So anyway, it just works with me. So King Alfred, well, he's the red Sour Patch Kid. Anyway, all right, so we're going to go ahead and deal out 4 cards to each player. 5 cards to each player, 4 of which we're going to be able to keep. Also note that everyone gets action tokens. Beyond card play, you also have action tokens. You spend these action tokens on the market to be able to do these actions during a round. These are always available, but the cost is variable. All right, let's get going. We're going to set up for the draft round now. Okay, it is drafting time. This is phase one of each round. We have round one followed by round two. They are generally, for all intents and purposes, identical. So, on the round, and this will happen relatively simultaneously, everyone is going to look at their cards and decide which one they're going to keep and which ones they're going to pass to their neighbor. For example, this one here is pretty simple. If I want this card, it's going to be an instant action as a secondary action, which means that I can play it before I play my primary action on any given turn, and I'm going to get well, like it says, you gain an affinity with the faction that you have the least affinity with, and in a tie you gain one, then you gain an action token. Yeah, and then you play it immediately. So you get it right away and you get rolling. So hey, you know what? That's cool. However, there are other ones that might be a little more advantageous. For example, during play, Long March will let you move 2 armies up to 2 regions away, and then you get an action token. All of these have a variety of different effects, etc. You're going to pick one of these. Say, for example, right now I'm Danish, or the Danes, and I'm going to say, you know what, I like this one because right now my affinity is Danish, so I might keep that one. So, all right, and then we pass it over, and then King Alfred is going to look and go, what do I want to do? Well, of course I want that one. I can think quickly. And then we pass these cards over to Ragnar. Ragnar's going to choose a card for himself, and then pass these to Aethelflaed, and then then pass them on. You're going to do this 4 times, and then on the 5th card you're just going to discard, and that's the way it goes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and speed up through this and just get certain cards set up so you don't have to watch this situation. There's lots of playthroughs. I'll link to a couple of them, but anyway, there you go. Okay, we're back, and each of the 4 players has chosen 4 cards in conjunction with their 2 custom cards for their leader. And that's that. So everyone's ready to go. When this phase is done, and then what happens is everyone that has a special instant ability is going to use that right then and there. So for example, effective tactics. Well, look, I gain an action token. Well, cool. Not only do I gain an action token, but I have a permanent effect that says once per turn before performing a market action, I can move the cheapest plaque to the most expensive plaque. Well, that's cool. That's helpful. So he's going to play this outright, and this is going to be a stay in the tableau permanently, and get an action token. So that's pretty cool. And that leaves him with 5 different cards. Same here. We have one action here that says, okay, well, whatever, I get to gain an affinity in anything I have the lowest of. So there we go. Up we go here, and I get an action token. And you'll notice that there's a lot of action tokens for King Alfred. There we go. And then we go over here and we see that there's, oh look, I gain 1 Dane affinity. So that's actually handy because he's now crossed the threshold where any victory that Ragnar gains as a Dane is going to give him a 3x multiplier rather than a 2x multiplier. That's handy. So that was worth it. So he did that. And then finally, we have 2 friendships for Aethelflaed. She also gets a beef because, yes, it is possible for her to sympathetically side with the Danes for certain conflicts. Everybody switches allegiances. That's part of the game and the show. And then she's going to get an action token, and she's going to get to beef up her Mercian. So cool. So she too is on the threshold of going up to another multiplier. And that's that. Now we're going to get rolling on the game. Whoever has the lowest initiative, and that in this case is Uhtred, gets to choose as we enter the conflict phase where the conflict is going to take place. Right now, Uhtred's allegiance is Dane. That doesn't mean he can't change it. In fact, there's a market action right there that he can change it if he wants to, because you don't get any victory points if the side that you weren't alleged to wins a given area in a conflict. And so if the Saxons were to win in an area and Uhtred was Danish, he would get consolation prizes of some action tokens that will help boost him for future conflicts, but he's not going to get victory points. So that's the thing. So we're going to set this here. Uhtred has decided this is the first place of conflict. Is that enough? No. Because the person with the second initiative is going to get to choose the succession token and place it somewhere else. This means this is where we're going to fight, And this is where we're going to fight next. She wants to fight it out in Mercia. She likes her odds there. That's right. She of the Green Sour Patch tribe has spoken. And there we go. And then the player with the third lowest initiative gets to go first, and then turns happen around. What can you do on your turn? Well, I'm glad you asked. You may play a card. It is right there for you to do. If you play a card that's a primary action, well, that ends your turn, and there you go. And then it's the next player's turn. There's also some secondary actions that can be played, and those can be played. Many of those can be played, and then you can play a primary action. What else can you do on your turn? Well, you can also do a market action by paying the cost, in this case, three to six action tokens, and you can perform these actions. What do they do? Well, again, changes allegiance, lets you look through an additional lets you look through round 2 cards and grab one. This lets you boost your affinities. This lets you add Dane tokens, shift, move, etc. There's a lot of options here, and these are just there for you as market actions. So you may do one of those per turn. You also may move your leader. Each card has a way that says you can spend two or a certain amount of actions to move your leaders. Why would you do that? Because your leaders are going to influence the strength in a given region, and strength is what decides whether the Danes win or the Saxons win. And you can pass, and passing isn't something you do once. It's something you could be doing multiple times. It's sort of almost jockeying more than passing in certain ways, but the timing is very important. Why? Because if you pass and everyone else passes, that's it. That triggers the resolution of the conflict in the region. Now, for example, like if Ragnar, he's kind of happy here where it is. He's got 3, because we look and we go 3, look at all that strength. So 3, we're going to set the strength now. 1, 2, 3. Each army gives you 1 strength. Each leader hero gives you 1 strength, unless they say otherwise. In this case, Ragnar gives 1. Also, with Uhtred in there, you'll notice that he actually gives 2 in round 1 and 2 more. So he already the strength there is 6. Well, how about our friends the Saxons? Well, there's 2 Northumbrians, so that's 2. So that's a big gap. It's going to be a pretty big gap for anyone who's allied with the Saxons to be able to win that conflict. So their choices are, they're either going to I'm going to invest in here and try and turn the tide, or maybe I look ahead. Maybe I look ahead to the next battleground conflict to see if maybe go ahead and let them have their day here, but prepare here to get a better victory point output. And that's the kind of thinking that you're going to have. In this case, Ragnar's going to pass. He's not going to do anything. It seems like he has a lot of cards, but remember, those cards are all you get for all 5 conflicts. And so you might not want to just blow all your strength on the first conflict if there are other conflicts coming up that you're going to be starved for and lose out on. All right, so then we have Aethelflaed, and she looks and says to herself, what a wonderful world. She's going, I don't see a lot of potential here, but however, she knows, so she could do something. You know what? Let's have her do something. She's going to spend 2 to move. She's going to move. She's going to move up here. That's right. And then she's going to add 1. So now the gap is a little less. Why would she do that? Well, maybe she has a plan. All right. Uhtred, he could do a variety of different things. He could add more Danes in a region. That could give him more points. Because leaders don't score. Leaders contribute to strength, but they don't score. Generally speaking, they don't. Leaders and a leader. The difference between a leader and a hero is that a leader is someone a player controls. A hero is just someone who comes into play that has a figure that goes on the map too. So heroes can contribute to strength, and most of them contribute to victory points at the end. Leaders do not. And so right now, these 3 leaders aren't going to contribute any victory points, even if they're contributing strength toward winning or losing. So in this case, we're going to look and go, let's just do a primary action here. This is add 2 Dane armies to a region adjacent to a region with at least 2 Dane armies. Well, that's cool. What makes that cool? Well, let me show you. Because adding 2 Dane armies to a region adjacent means adjacent here means I have just narrowed the gap for a subsequent conquest. I still think that the Danes can win here, but now I'm boosting myself for a future conflict in this same round. So now it's a little less lopsided. And then King Alfred looks and goes, you know what? I don't have anything particularly I could do. But yes, he is. He can spend 6 of his action tokens. 6, I tell you. 6. And he can do England is Born. England is Born. He could, but he's not gonna. I've changed my mind. He's not gonna do that yet. Instead, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's not gonna do that. He doesn't feel the need. He's gonna do Chaos, and Chaos says draw a round 2 card and add it to your hand. All right, and it doesn't end the player's turn, so he's going to add a round 2 card. What is this one? This one's a more, Battle Lust. So now he has an option. It doesn't end his turn, so he can do other things. Look at this, Unite the Kingdom. If the Saxons have higher strength in these regions, then you can gain affinity. And affinity is important. Those multipliers add up. And so he could do that, or... look at that. Add 2 West Saxon armies to a region that is adjacent to a region with at least 2 Dane armies, then remove 1 army from that region. Well, guess what he's going to do? It's like, okay, Uhtred. He's going to add 2 because it's adjacent here, and he's going to remove 1. Look at that. Now they're preparing. So there, and that's literally the interchange that's going to go on. So we're going to go, okay, Ragnar passes. He's still feeling good. And now Aethelflaed is going to spend her 3. That's right. And she's going to use this primary action. And that primary action says, change your allegiance. So now, she is Danish too. All right. Now get this. This is cool. Look at her special ability. Other heroes and leaders in Aethelflaed's region that share her allegiance are an extra strength. So not only does she contribute her strength, but the other 2 leaders there contribute their strength. This is an overwhelming victory. Yay! Happiness. So now she's changed her allegiance. And that's that. And so Uhtred's like, hey, glad to join you, Aethelflaed. We had some good times. Let me, I won't give away the spoilers, but let's have fun till the end. And then King Alfred goes, I'm just going to worry about Mercia. And so everybody passes. Now that everyone's passed, we determine winner or loser. Well, clearly the Danes have won this region. They have won. Yay! The strength is 9-3. So now you go into point resolution, and this is where it gets a little sadder. For those who are on the same allegiance, they're going to score victory points based on up to 5 units here. You just pick the 5 you want, and it varies because, for example, if you have a high affinity in Northumbria, you're going to want to choose for your 5 units the Northumbrians over, say, another one that you don't have, because the multipliers are going to play a part in this. So right now we've got 3 Danes. Leaders do not contribute. If there were heroes, that would be different, but there aren't. So 3 times 1, 2, 3 times 2 is 6. So guess what? Uhtred gets 6. Aethelflaed gets 6. But hey, look at this. 3, because we boosted his affinity up here, 3 times 3 is 9. So he's going to get 9 victory points, Mr. Ragnar is. He's feeling it. All right, 9 victory points. And that's it. And that's the end of that conflict. So now what do? Well, first off, we shift this. Isn't this cool? We shift this over. So now this is expensive, and this is not as expensive. So what we do is we say the Danes won here, so they have peace. We do a check and say, are there more than 5 armies in here? Then you have to pare them down. And so that's where you might not want to send overwhelming forces into a place that's going to basically overwhelm it, and then you lose all those units because there's too many. So 5 is the magic number. You pare them down. There's a sequence for paring them down, but ultimately you don't want to win by too much. You don't want to lap your opponent that much. So there we go. Then those who didn't win, and Alfred is the only one who wasn't allied to the winner of that conflict, he's going to get 2 extra action tokens. And there's a special bonus because he's the only one that lost. He gets 2 more. So, and same way, if you're the only one that wins a conflict, you're going to get a boost in victory points too. So it's good to be 1. There can only be 1 unless there's not. All right, so there we go. So this conflict is done. We are not going to be fighting over Northumbria again this round. So then this moves here. this moves, and this moves wherever. And this is the one thing I didn't say, is that one of the way you can pass by just saying I pass and I wait and see what you guys do. There's also a, okay, I'm gonna pass and I'm not gonna be able to do anything else for the rest of this conflict, but I'm gonna grab this token. And when you do this, you're gonna get action tokens for every shield on the map. Early on in the round, it's not going to matter. If you grab this first, you're going to get to pick where the next conflict is. You're not going to get action tokens, but it gets a little more valuable to pass with impact, with feeling, by grabbing this and preparing for an invasion. Whoever grabs this, when the time comes to place this in again in the next conflict of the same round, they're going to get to pick. In this case, nobody picked it, so it basically just goes to Aethelflaed, who's going to pick again, I believe. And so Wessex is our next battle. And there you go. You're going to do this 5 times. You're going to do this until every single region on this map, all 5, have a peace shield either from Danes or from the Saxons. And that's it. At that point, round 1 is over. You're going to go ahead and gather up the round 1 cards. You're going to give everyone back their special cards. You're going to do a couple maintenance housekeeping things. And then you're going to do round 2 with the round 2 cards. And again, these are similar in the very same thing. When everything is done, after round 2 is done, you're going to count up the points, and whoever has the most points is going to win. That's the essence of the Last Battle, Last Kingdom, the board game by John DeClaire. Let's get into my final thoughts on what I think of this game. Okay, final thoughts on the Last Kingdom board game. What did I think and why did I thunk it? As always, we go into the cons first, and then we go into the pros, and then we go into my final thoughts. As for the cons, I would say that there's a couple readability, information, presentation niggles that I think were ones that were a little tricky not terribly tricky to come over, but let me explain. As you know, I'm not a painter, and so the figurines that come with the game, yay, thanks for providing them, but also, in between the time that I was filming and now, as I played the game more, I just ended up grabbing a Sharpie and writing the names of the characters on there, because it's trickier. It was tricky enough for me, but although the poses are great, you can kind of really, based on the poses and the settings, it's pretty easy to tell when you're looking at the characters which one is which. It's a little bit trickier if A, you don't know anything about the Last Kingdom and you're trying to match them up, and B, the fact that unlike many games, you do not have your own personal color to this, to this at all. You don't have hey, if there's a red ring underneath it, that's mine. You have allegiance rings. You don't have, this is my character ring, because other than the leaders that you grab, the heroes themselves can belong to any other player. And so there's a reason for that, but it is a readability issue, particularly as the game goes on and you've got more heroes on the map and you're trying to remember who's who and which is which. That was a little trickier, not insurmountable by any stretch, just something to keep in mind. I ended up putting gummy bears to kind of help track for people which is which, but that's not obviously required. Many people can see through, they'll remember okay, my guys are here, whatever. The rulebook is great. I think it did a really good job, but there was also the issue where a couple things that could have been spelled out more clearly were not, and that caused a little bit of a hiccup. There's one piece of information that I think is pretty core that's in the summary guide on the very last page in the very bottom paragraph, the last sentence, which I think needed to be spelled out more just to clear any previous confusion, which was about heroes traveling. But otherwise, that's not problematic. The 2-player is decent, but I think it's an achievement at all when any area control game can make a 2-player game work and work okay. But definitely grab some extra players if you can. I think it shines best I like 4, some people like 5, 3 is fine, 2 is okay. Nothing wrong with it. It's not at a detriment. Like some games that say 2 to 5, but really they mean 3 to 5, and the 2-player is a little... Now, this does a good job. It does a serviceable, decent, consistently decent job at a 2-player, but it's not something I'm going to go, wow, cool. And then there's 2 big issues that need to be brought up, not because I personally have an issue with them, but because they're ones that have been publicly and consistently denoted as problematic for some types of potential purchasers and players of the game. One is the use of stills. Many people, there is a contingent of people who believe that, a game should have custom artwork, that you shouldn't use stills from a movie that it's taken from. I believe that most of the games I have that use stills, I don't necessarily care for, but that's more because the game itself is just as phoned in as the idea of grabbing stills from the game, and so I look at that differently. I frankly wouldn't want hand-drawn art. I don't know that I would trust that the hand-drawn art would. I don't have the confidence that it would be as well done and that as I think the stills are in the game. I yeah, I don't know. Licensing. I mean, I've done games in the past, like video games, and licensing is not something you can just take carte blanche. Like, we have the license, we can do whatever we want. So who knows what the reasons were for using stills? Maybe it was intentional, maybe it was contractual. Either way, I think this is the best use of stills in a game. I think it's done tastefully. I think it's done contextually. I look at the action being done. I look at the picture, and I'm like, I can totally see that in the series. I think it just brings me back to the series, which The Last Kingdom is one of the very few video series that I have watched multiple times. Usually I'm a one and done, and I just appreciate what I had. This one I've watched multiple times and enjoyed it every time. So points for that. And so I think that I have zero issues with the stills. If you do in general have just in general stills, I'll never buy a game with stills. You're not going to be convinced otherwise. But I definitely wouldn't suggest making that an objection point if you can help it, because I think it works really well. I also think that there was maybe a lost opportunity with the map itself. On the game board, it's very, very subdued. I'm going to be nice and call it subdued. I agree with the decision to keep the map itself subdued, because I think it can become an issue with being busy. For example, Border Reavers, a game I absolutely love and which is strikingly, surprisingly similar in certain ways to this game, albeit on a more complex level, has a more busy board, and it did become a little bit of a readability issue, but I would rather have gone that way than not. I do like that it's a large board with a large map, because you have lots of units that are going to be on the board, especially in the latter stages of the game. But I think that there's ways to do it and still give it a little bit of life, more so than I saw on the game board. Enis, Ethnos, Hammer of the Scots, I mean, you name it. And these games all have similar situations, and people don't like the Ethnos board either, but I still think it's a little more stylish than this game ended up being. I've been spoiled too. There's also other like area control games, and Banish the Snakes, all the coin games, Border Reavers, etc. There was another game that kind of had a similar issue called Blackout Hong Kong, which was a fantastic game, but the board was literally almost blacked out. And while that was thematic and contextual, they ended up doing a second rev that actually had a much more pleasing board, and I think it helped them with sales and such. There's no problem with the art as far as what it does. I get what they're trying to do, keeping it subdued. I just didn't like the popcorn on the ceiling tinted kind of of it. But again, once you have units on the map, you're going to find other ways that there are going to be cool touches that kind of bring life into the game. Probably because when I'm showing this game to people, I want them to feel, wow, this looks cool. I hope it's a fun game, rather than, I hope the game's good. And unfortunately, the response when I show this game to people, and I've played this a bunch with people a lot, is the latter, and I wish it was the former. Now, knowing the credits of the artists involved, I believe that was a conscious design to keep it subtle, and I'm fine with that. It had no impact on my decision to back it, but it did have an impact on others, and I think that's why I'm saying it was probably some lost potential. Not for me, a diehard gonna buy this no matter what. But and I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that this game can kind of wind up hitting, like being really well received. So far, it seems to be, but it also might hit less of a potential segment of the audience than it could. Not because of the game or because the art is wrong, but because people won't give it a thorough chance on first glance, and that's kind of it's okay. Again, I'm fine with it, but others may not be, and have vocally expressed. So that's it. That's it for the cons, or at least the things to be mindful of. Let's get into the pros. First off, before we even get to the game, let's talk about the Kickstarter process itself. This game was set up, I backed it in March. It arrived in July. Like, yeah, I would have backed this. I would have backed this game anyway. But just this is my sweet spot of a Kickstarter process, and it's very rare. I love that you just like, I give you money, you'll give me product, we happy. That's really what this game, this process was, and I love it. I love the fact that the price point is perfect for what you get. You get value, you get great components, you get the miniatures, you get all that, and with sleeves. And I will say props for readability. Even though I mentioned a couple things that weren't readable, I think that there are other things that make it readable and easier in other ways. And I want to give props out to that. For example, when it comes to icons, icons are okay. I understand matter of fact, I'm playing a game right now that's basically 100% driven iconically with almost no text. And it's very difficult to try and get people going, and there's just a lot of, it just drags you down trying to explain again what the iconography means and going back to, especially without any player guides. So this game, Last Kingdom, does something different. It gives you those icons, but then it also gives you the actual text on the cards to read, which means everyone can then be their own teacher and student. And that's huge, and I'm very grateful that they did that. Thank you for doing that. The placards and the cards and the artwork, they're all stylish, and they're done really, they made it really easy to read and understand and digest the information. Here's what your leader can do. Here's what your hero can do. Here's what you start with. Here's your special ability. Here's what you have to do to move. Everything's there so that you don't have to go back to the well-written rule book. That's important because of the varying audiences. Who is this for? Well, it was for Kickstarters, but it's also likely to be on shelves too. It's going to appeal because of the Netflix logo to people who love the series and might enjoy the game. And so the more readability you can imbue into this game, the better. And the rulebook is just the right size for this game. It offers, a full inventory of the components, which is amazingly scarce in some ways. Like thank you for telling me in the rulebook every single piece I need to account for. Iconic guide on the back is great. The example of play is just fine, does the job, explain things well. Simultaneous play is fantastic. The idea that wherever you can have simultaneous play, do have simultaneous play. This is the second game that's done that, and I love them both. It's just right. This is the timing of the game. The time of the game is just right. I originally thought, 2 rounds, that's it. But it makes sense because those 2 rounds encompass 5 different combats, so you are getting a meaty amount of value. 3 would have been too long, I think. And it's funny how many games they do like 3 rounds. I don't know what it is about the 3s, but this one does 2 rounds and it does it well, and I'm very happy with the choice made there. And honestly, whether it's a licensed properly or whatever, the designer's savvy shows through. This is John DeClaire we're talking about. This is a guy who's made hit after hit after hit after hit, and just shown some real savvy in a lot of ways. This is not a cash grab. This is not I have time in between my real games and you've got a license, so let's just do this over the weekend. No, nothing. Lots of games based on shows. Homeland, the original Vikings game, Spartacus, are okay games, decent games. But this is so not that. This is so much more. It's fully evident that this is a first-class design from a first-class designer without compromise. You see the game, the TV show being shown in the game through the game's mechanics, and that shows that it wasn't just, here's a system, let's slap the theme on it and get it out the door. Let's make bucks here. An example is Aylesworth. Aylesworth, she is, in her role, and I'm not going to spoil it for you too much, but her role in the initial seasons of The Last Kingdom was antagonistic and minuscule, mostly just a grouch, and stuff. She starts this game with one action point. That's all you get, one action token. But then she has this way to just burst, to gravitate, to burst at the seams and eventually get tons of actions. And that is so evocative of her role in The Last Kingdom. Again, starting out as this sour nag bit player, and then becomes over the seasons to this prominent and pivotal role where you're at times rooting for her. And that's a, that's just one of the examples of the ways that you can see based on the card play what it is, that it's not just a slapped on board game system that they've just thrown a couple little homages to the Last Kingdom. It's not. Through and through, it's all, a lot of the game systems are rooted in the idea of playing through the Last Kingdom. All of the character cards, they display this charm and personality of the show that are parallel, in their ways in the game. Who doesn't like Aethelflaed? She's my second. I mean, of course you're gonna like Uhtred. Destiny is all right with me, but Aethelflaed. But then all the other ones. It just goes on and on. And I really like the allegiance switching. I think that makes a pivotal role and fits in well. The switching aspects are just right, because they could be really, really jarring. And at times they're very pronounced at times, the switching of allegiances, but it's not utterly implausible. Alfred can't switch, but he can get a bonus as if he could have and would have, because Alfred's never going to switch allegiance to Dane. He's the king of the Britons. So anyway, but I love that they do that, and then they add this other layer of affinity relevance, where you're subdividing the Saxons into these factions that it's a brilliant stroke to show the infighting ramifications, whereas the Danes are more homogeneous in their intent. And so it balances those 3 and 4 and does it in a way that you don't just go for the Danes because, whatever. Like you have this subtle stroke of genius in how all those play out on a simple affinity track. And so points for that. There's veins of actions that are meaningful, and it's not just, apologies, add 2 cubes to this pandemic location. I'm glad that they go above and beyond it. They've elevated and evolved past that. Thank you. Yes, you have shifting, and yes, you're going to be adding and removing units, but you're also going to be doing those so with some trade-offs. You're going to be seeing these gut quivering trade-offs when the actions you take, as well as things that make sensible the action based on the card play being described. There's market actions. There's a nice touch of the default bank of actions that if you have the points that you can do. I mean, they're basically things you can count on being able to do if you have enough action points, so that you're not totally at the mercy of card play. And I could see roots of other games, and this is even mentioned in the rule book. Blood Rage, The King is Dead. It has roots to those other games, and I see that, but it also has its own personality that shines through. Blood Rage was all about surprise, blood rage, this is not about that surprise in the moment, but it is more about preparatory surprise as you're going around, making, by the time the combat comes to conclusion, you kind of know the results. You don't get any surprise, I win after all, but you do see you're going around going, okay, if no one passes, if no one messes with my plans, I'm doing good. And so you still have that same kind of tension. It's just in another location of the gameplay phase. And then the risk reward. I mean, you live to fight another region. Not everything makes sense to win if you think you can position yourself for better wins later. And that's a fun thing to have to grapple with. Passing in this game is not the thing you do when you've exhausted all the fun stuff. Passing is a strategy unto itself, because you are trying to manage all the cards that have to go over 5 battles. You have to manage actions and action points, and manage, is this worth it? Am I going to get enough points? Could I do something else differently? So passing is a strategy all its own, and I like that they've elevated passing to more than just the thing you do after everything else is done. And you see swings and shifts, but with facilities to plan as well. It's not just blind surprises like, oh, well, nothing I can do about that. It's more like, okay, you know what's coming forwards. You have that partial foresight, which is a great mechanic I like in games. And this is more than just the I wouldn't give me points. I mean, how many troops, what composition you have of troops, maximizing the affinities of those troops, and steering battles to include those types that you have the best affinity with, are all aspects of this sort of metagaming beyond just me big stick, oh you bigger stick, ouch, next. That it's not nearly that simple and trite. And losing can be mitigated, and winning can be stunted. These are things that you have to grapple with in what seems like a simple system, but it's really not. And there's lots of things that seem obvious about this game when you look at it or start to dabble with it, but then you find it that those things that seem obvious are less so as you see the different abilities, the different shifts, the different cards come into play. And so points for that in general. So in final thoughts of The Last Kingdom, this is the second game in a row that's had a drafting system followed by a rich combat. Am I in heaven or what? I love it. I love this game. And let's break it down by audience and say who would I recommend this for. Here are your audiences. You have the Kickstarter backers like me who backed it anyway, and they're going to be I mean, it's if you backed it, I hope you love it, because I think it's everything that it claimed to be at a price point that's surprisingly less than most games on Kickstarter today. Then there's the non-Kickstarter backers, but the gamers who looked at it, and I recommend it for them because I think they're going to find a solid game that's going to stand the test of time, that isn't just a one-off. You know, hey, I like Last Kingdom, I'll put up with basic gameplay if I get the Last Kingdom characters. This isn't like that at all. So unless you are instantly just theoretically and you know, for purposes of just, you know, principle put off by stills or the board, this is an absolute great fit for you to get. If you are a John DeClair fan, if you are someone who loves everything he does and yet you still don't have intimate awareness of the show, while the full scope and the homage to the movie series won't be present, the game stands firmly on its own as an engaging and interesting affair. And this may actually even lead you to want to watch those games or watch that series, because I think you'll find it engaging. And then there's the mainstream people who love the series and like see this on the shelf. And as far as complexity goes, it will press them, but I don't think it will break them in learning this game and enjoying it. I think enough has been done to pave the way to make this as easy as possible, even if you're not necessarily an avid gamer, to understand and be able to play it, because this is a solid and worthy testament to the series, the likes of which other licensed games have not really achieved. And then there's the you know, the Kickstarter backers or purchasers who love The Last Kingdom and love John DeClair's design and don't mind iconic stills from the game, aka me. And even with the less than Mona Lisa level map as a pittance of a hesitation point, it's a hearty recommendation to enjoy this game. If gameplay is the thing that matters to you the most, this is an unreserved A+ experience. That's right. This game's destiny is all right. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.